We just finished our meditation section, and now we will discuss our lesson for today. I thought it would be nice to focus actually on a series of lessons in the Course in Miracles. Just for those of you who are new to this, A Course in Miracles is a metaphysical text that was considered to be kind of channeled by two Columbia psychologists, actually. And it's basically a psychological retraining of the mind, to retrain your mind from a philosophy and mindset based on fear-based thoughts to love-based thoughts. So here's a copy of the book for you to look at while we're here. You don't have to if you don't want to. But there's a series of lessons. First of all, I wanted to check in with you. How has your practice been going, Frederic?
Very well. I'm enjoying very much the Course of Miracles. And I still do my Shambhavi.
Awesome.
Kriya. So almost 120 days.
Wow.
Like this weekend.
120 days.
Wow. This weekend.
How fantastic.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So today I thought we would start with lesson 31. It's on page 48 of the text.
Okay, I'm just looking for a pair of reading glasses.
No problem. And so the lesson 31, I thought it would be useful to take this lesson in tandem with the following two lessons 31, 32, and 33. So lesson 31, the message of that, it's on page 48 of the workbook section. So yeah, flip back a little bit more. You might be in the teacher's manual. Okay. So it's lesson 31 is, I am not the victim of the world I see. And Ronnie, you don't even have to read along.
Right, I
You can't
realize
find
that.
Your
I mean,
glasses.
I have
We
so
can-
many zippers.
We can say it aloud. So,
I'm missing 29.
oh, so you're getting close. So, I am not the victim of the world I see is the message of this lesson. And then it's followed by a lesson which says, I have invented the world that I see. And then the one following that is, there is another way of looking at the world. So if you're familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, right, you can kind of see how this parallels some other systems of thought, but in a way, for me personally, I find it much more heart-based and relatable versus feeling like it's focusing on a problem that needs to be fixed. This is about reshaping your worldview, and it really empowers you to do that. So I'm just going to read you a little bit about this lesson and what the message is. So again, the main message of this lesson is, I am not the victim of the world I see. Today's idea is the introduction to your declaration of release. Again, the idea should be applied to both the world you see without and the world you see within. In applying the idea, we will use a form of practice which we've used before. Basically, you're applying it to things that you look at and saying, like, this is really, I'm not a victim of whatever this circumstance is. I'm just going to skip ahead a couple paragraphs to the interesting part about it. As you survey your inner world, merely let whatever thoughts cross your mind come into your awareness, each to be considered for a moment and then replaced by the next. Try not to establish any hierarchy among them. Watch them come and go as dispassionately as possible. Do not dwell on anyone in particular, but try to let the stream move on evenly and calmly, without any special investment on your part. As you sit quietly and watch your thoughts, repeat today's idea to yourself as often as you care to, but with no sense of hurry. So the idea is to be a witness of your own thoughts, and the thoughts that come in, the thoughts that come out, and to not place some thoughts as more important than other thoughts. That's what we tend to do, is we tend to rate, like, oh, this thought is super important and super urgent, and this one is less important and less urgent. But actually, they're all just thoughts, and they all have the same value. So that's kind of the message here. And we often feel victimized by our own thoughts. In fact, we victimize ourselves right, with our own fear-based thoughts. Can anyone think of an example of a situation even that they might have been in or might be in now where they're feeling kind of like a hostage to their thoughts?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to share about it?
Yeah, that I probably have 20 years to live if I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, unless I really believe in an afterlife, that's a very frightening thought.
Okay. So there's some fear related to to your
growing
life,
old,
to growing old
and dying,
and not being eternal. And what is a beautiful element of A Course in Miracles is you don't necessarily need to subscribe to the belief that yes, the life in your physical body may end. For any of us, we don't really know when that will be. But there is something lasting and eternal in you that will continue. And this is what we're nurturing here. So right now you're feeling victimized by the thought that your life in your physical body is, for the majority, over, right? It's nearing its end.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a choice to be made. You could choose to see it in a different way, and only you can decide what kind of thought would feel different for you. So I really encourage you to just open to your mind to the alternative ways of thinking about that. So this is going to be really helpful for you. In particular, the next piece of this lesson says, repeat this idea, right? That I'm not a victim of the world I see as often as possible throughout the day. And remind yourself that you are making a declaration of independence in the name of your own freedom. And in your freedom lies the freedom of the world. So basically, by choosing to change your thought system or change the way you think, you're freeing yourself from a life filled with fear. Because what is the result of having the thought that your life is nearing its end and you don't want to be?
Oh, it's depression.
Depression?
Well, that's not what was your question?
That's a good answer. That was my, what is the result of having that thought? So
yeah,
it makes you
depression.
feel depressed.
Yeah.
And even worse, it robs you of the present moment. It robs you of living in your experience right now,
mm-hmm.
right? Because it takes away the pleasure, right? And we all have those kinds of thoughts. It may not be about death, but it may be a fear of something happening in the future. What if something happens to my child? Or what if I don't get that promotion? Or what if my job ends? Or
mm-hmm.
my husband leaves me? Or any number of things that we could start to project into the future. The moment that we start projecting in the future, we have robbed ourselves of the present and all that it has to offer. And created a shift and a trajectory sort of toward a certain place as well, right? If you think, well, I'm almost done here, what's the point of doing anything, right?
Yes.
And you have a loving family that needs you, and they need you and they want you here now, regardless of what's going to happen 20 years from now. So this may feel, I know this is your first experience with A Course in Miracles, and it's going to take time to absorb, and it may feel like kind of a shock to the system to hear these kinds of alternatives.
Wow.
But they're all choices. So this, what it says in closing about this lesson is that the idea for today is also a particularly useful one to use as a response to any form of temptation that may arise. It is a declaration that you will not yield to it and put yourself in bondage. So this is a huge one, and it's such a nice complement to the meditation we did. For those of you who are joining us by video, we did a meditation to conquer self-animosity. And it's about kind of getting over the use of the ego and how it wants to interfere with our own highest good. And again, this thought is useful because we may have thoughts that lead to kind of addictive behaviors that keep us in bondage. And the addiction could be to things we typically think of as addictive, like drugs or alcohol, but also things like shopping or workaholism, or an addiction to fear, an addiction to being a victim and blaming other people for our circumstances. We're all great at that. Like, we've been trained to blame everyone and everything for the circumstances that we don't like in our life. It might even be blaming our genetics, right? We may be angry at our genetics that we got saddled with this condition or that condition. But all of those perspectives leave us powerless and a victim, which leads to more depression, more powerlessness, and more feeling like a victim, right? So here we get to make a choice that no matter what our circumstance, we can choose how we're going to perceive it. And that's the miracle, Ronnie. That's the miracle, is that change in perception of going from, like, I only have 20 years maximum left and I don't want it to be that way, to, wow, I'm here right now, I'm meditating, I'm discussing really exciting ideas with people that are similarly interested in, and like, what a great moment right now is. We may walk out of here and who knows what will happen, but we don't need to fear that. We need to just have some trust that we can build more positivity in our future if we put our mind in that direction. And if we want to go down the negative path, we're all great at creating that. So let's create those positive tracks as much as we can.
Yeah, well, I've always already thought of something that takes me out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to follow the things that I feel God calling me to do.
Okay.
And to do them.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So when you listen to your inner guidance, when you trust your intuition and you follow it, like, you don't just listen to it and ignore it, but you listen to it and do it, you notice that you feel better.
Yes.
Right? So that's really powerful. That's really, and the proof is in the pudding in some ways. That experiential learning and proof by results is, if you're having doubts, to just test things and see how they go. I know when I trust my instincts and go with it, things flow. When I resist my instincts or don't listen to them, things never work out right, And we always end up, like, doing it one way or another later, but probably after more suffering. So we can avoid that suffering by just going with that initial hit. And that's why, these lessons take the form of meditations. So the idea is to sit with your highest self and get in touch with what you do feel called to do. Any more thoughts about this particular lesson before I move on to the one that follows it? We're good? Okay. So the lesson 31 is, I am not the victim of the world I see. And why is this? Because lesson 32, I have invented the world that I see. And this comes back to what we've been saying in our past weeks, which is basically that our perception shapes our reality. And what we perceive in the world is completely a projection upon what's in our own mind. And so that's where the lesson says, you are not the victim of the world you see because you invented it. And you can give it up as easily as you made it up. This is a very important aspect of this lesson, and something that over time I myself and most people that I've worked with have major resistance to the idea that we could possibly have invented the world that we see, right? Like, what do you mean? This is a book. Everyone agrees that it's a book. Of course it's a book. It's not a projection of my mind, but it's a group projection. We've all agreed that this object is called a book, and that's the language that we speak, right? So,
because for me, it's a livre, already, right? Just
it's
a different language.
She's French.
In languages. So it's like we name it because it's not, like, we have to give a name because it's not what it is, so we have to call it book. Otherwise we can't.
we can't communicate, we can't connect with others.
Right.
And does the feel for you, the idea of a book in French versus in English, does it have a different feeling for you?
It doesn't work for the solid, like the material things, but for the feelings or stuff that are so emotional in French, and I can say it in English, and it's like here instead of being inside. So it's very interesting.
Oh wow, fascinating.
How like you can be wrapped up in your thoughts, and then realize that if you tell someone in another language, it doesn't have the same resonance. And so it's not. So like I can say things to my kids in English that I'm unable to say in French, which is very interesting as well. So even in like what I like to give them, certain things come in English instead of coming in French because maybe it's too heavy in French, or like I don't know exactly why, but I experienced it.
So this is the idea of things being untranslatable. There are some expressions, words, feelings that you cannot put into a different language because they only
I think
exist.
about that in terms of mystical experiences.
Uh-huh.
It is impossible to put a mystical experience in language.
Right.
You can say what happened. You can one can narrate.
You can try to
what
describe
happened
it.
and describe it, but the experience of it is untranslatable.
Yes. You know the feeling. And that's what carries you.
Right.
And that's why a student who came a few weeks ago was kind of fascinated the idea that we are meeting and talking about this course, because for her it's been almost exclusively an experiential kind of thing. So to try to discuss it and put words on it is can be challenging, right? Because we're talking about very ethereal concepts here, and we're trying to bring them back to the earth level so that we can share our experiences. And we have to put them in words in order to communicate. At least most of us. Some people can communicate by pure energy, but that's not what we're doing here. Maybe by the end we'll have that mastered. We won't need words. But right now, words are our medium, right? They're a transitional thing that we need in order to be able to share our ideas. I love this idea, though, that, okay, you've invented the world that you see, but we can give it up as easily as you made it up, right? There are so many things that we're not willing to give up, most of which is our own fear.
So have we invented it, or was it invented for us?
Well, the way we understood, right? Even if like someone gives us some explanation, we understand a certain way. So it was given to us, this is a book, and we said, okay, that's a book. But other things we understood differently, and this is what we invented. It's what everybody has his own invention. And it looks alike very much, but it's slightly different.
Yeah, and I think, though, part of your question is, okay, like, did our fear come from us, or did it come from maybe our parents who infused us in a mentality based on fear, right? Based on the culture in which we live, which is a fear-based culture. If you turn on the news, you can see that. That's all you need to do, is turn on the news and see how addicted we are to fear. So we absorb it from those around us if we choose to, and if we don't know that there's a different way. So that's where it gets to be exciting for me as a parent in particular, because I haven't been doing this course for my entire life, and I was definitely raised in a family that was based on fear, and not because anyone was trying to harm anyone, but it's a scary, dangerous world. Just turn on the news, right? That's how I grew up. And so for me, it's a privilege that as a parent with young children, I've been able to use some of these tools to not carry that on, or at least to carry it on as little and as limited as a way that I can. Because how powerful is that if we can kind of share a different perspective with future generations, right? So, and it doesn't have to be just your child, but like your loved ones, your husbands, your spouses, partners, that any situation can be either a fearful one or a hopeful one. We were discussing job changes, So the fact that a significant other may lose his job could be really scary, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to pay the bills? What's going to happen to the kids? Or it can be like, wow, what a blessing, because something better and greater is coming in, and now there's space for it.
Adventure.
Now there's a space for it.
And we don't have any idea what it is.
Right. It could be the best thing that ever happened. So we can go down the fearful trajectory, which creates, in all likelihood, that we will manifest not being able to pay our bills, being miserable, being depressed, or we can choose a different way. We can look for those opportunities or create those opportunities that are exciting, light-filled, lucrative, and really a blessing. So this is how, if we can get over that mindset that every change is bad, or that bad things are going to happen when something happens that's out of our control that we didn't ask for, it shifts everything. I'm sure we can think of examples where we've done one or the other. So you can give up this mindset as easily as you made it up, and you will see it or not see it as you wish. While you want it, you will see it. When you no longer want it, it will not be there for you to see. So the idea here, this is about our own willingness to see things one way, or being willing to see things a different way. And as long as we're not willing to see things a different way, we won't, right? Because you have to be willing. No one can force this on us. We have to make a choice. Once we are willing to see it a different way, we will see it a different way and believe it. But it's a process of repetition, and that's why the daily lessons in this course are really important, because they build on one another, they're progressive, and the repetition is really important to kind of create new pathways of thinking in the brain. That's how I understand it from a scientific perspective. But just on a habitual basis, our fear is a habitual thought in some ways. And so to build a new habit, like any muscle, we need to continue to practice on a daily basis. So the idea for today, like the preceding one, applies to your inner and outer worlds, which are actually the same. However, since you see them as different, the practice period is in two phases, one involving the outer world and one involving the inner world. But really, from a metaphysical perspective, there's no difference between the outer and inner world, which is another kind of mind-blowing concept. What do you mean? Like, that's out there, this is in here. But do you
But
notice?
there's no in here if there's not out there.
It's all about, well, so that's a dualistic idea, right?
Yes.
That this can't exist without the other. But the other idea is that maybe it's all one, right? There is no, these are artificial physical boundaries that have been given to us so that we can do what we need to do in the world, share ideas, communicate as spirits, but really it's all just energy with certain physical boundaries. I'm not saying you have to believe this. This is just the philosophy of this course. And that allows us to create a different collective consciousness, right? If we are not just our little physical body isolated from everyone else in the world, but part of a greater collective consciousness, it gives us a far different potential and potential for change. So that inner world, why would be another reason, any other ideas about why there really is no difference between our outer world and our inner world?
Well, one hinges on the other. We respond to the outer world, we respond to the inner world. We're constantly in relationship to the outer world.
We create our outer world. It's us. It's just an extension of we create.
Okay.
Right? So because the things that are happening in our outer world are a reflection on some level of a decision that we've made in our inner world, right? So it's just the manifestation of what's already inside to something that's visible to the eye. And one of the really important concepts of this course is that if we judge and navigate this world based exclusively on our five senses, we're in trouble. Because those five senses can be very, very unreliable in a lot of ways. So it's about developing spiritual sight and being able to see with more than our physical eye. And so therefore there is no difference between the outer world and the inner world, because they're just...
No, it explains the difference between me and Joe.
They flow. Right. So this is a big one. And what they ask you to do as you try to reflect on the things in your outer world and your inner world is to repeat to yourself, I have invented this situation as I see it. And I find this as a really, really empowering message, because there might be something that's happening that I'm very upset about. Like yesterday, I went to my car and I was in a big hurry, like I always am, and the car would not start. And I was really upset and very nervous. Now, if I had just looked at this lesson, like, I've invented the situation as I see it. How would I apply that to a dead battery, car won't start, and the kids are waiting to be picked up? This would seem to be a situation where you would say, well, there is no other way to see it. That sucks, like, all the way around, and how horrible and scary. But I put all of those attribution and judgments on the situation, where ultimately I was able to get the battery replaced in time to get the kids. So my fear that I wasn't going to get them robbed me of energy that I would otherwise have had for other things, stressing about that. And I also started projecting. I was like, well, maybe it's not the battery. Maybe it's the starter. And maybe this is not going to be like $100 repair. Maybe I have an old Acura that needs to be replaced.
Went all the way with
like,
that.
What if it's going to be like $1,000 and I'm not going to have my car for a week? And how am I going to drive the kids around? And we can't. This is why I need to go back to New York, because I don't have to rely upon having a car. I went to town with this.
You really went.
I went to town with this. 2 seconds, all those thoughts happened, right? And I invented all of that. None of it was real. So that's why we are our own best experiments and petri dishes for this kind of stuff. Because in 0 to 2 seconds, I had all those thoughts. And I guarantee you, it was within seconds that my mind was flooded with all of that fear.
Yeah, not that long ago, I was driving down 4th, and I was like really like manic in a, you know, that kind of rush, impatient with everything and everyone, and I got into a horrible car accident.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I didn't get hurt, and as far as I know, the woman in the other car didn't get hurt, but I just assumed the street was a one-way street, because it becomes a one-way street.
So when we are full of that frantic energy, the universe will step in to slow us down one way or another.
It certainly slowed me down.
Yeah. And you won't be in that mindset again very soon driving. And I also, it was like, okay, Joy, you think you're going to rush around and plan your schedule by the second to fit everything in. Well, sorry, that's not going to work. So, and everything worked out in the end. That was the great part about it all, is that it was resolved, and this beautiful Russian gentleman came to change my battery, and I was having to, like, once he changed the battery, I say beautiful as beautiful in spirit, because the car still wasn't working right, because you need all these special codes that I didn't have access to. Like, who knew? For the GPS, for the radio, for the anti-theft system. And I couldn't get any help, and he insisted on staying with me until, like, all the people got on the phone and got me the codes. And it was still like 20 minutes, and I sent him off to continue his work. But that's like a miracle worker. That's how we all can be miracle workers in our day-to-day life. We don't have to, I've said this before, we don't have to be preachers, we don't have to be saints, we don't have to be nuns. we can be miracle workers in our everyday life. And the fact that he was willing to just wait there with me because he could see that I was nervous, to like, that, how beautiful. Like, and I won't ever forget him. I don't even know what his name was, right? And he will remember it too.
Energy, right? Energy.
Yeah, of course. And so, like, what a blessing that was from this not fun experience. So, any situation that's distressing you, this is the time to say, I've invented the situation as I see it. And then to move to the next step, which is the final lesson that we'll talk about today, which is lesson 33, is that there is another way of looking at the world, right? So this one is an attempt to recognize that you can shift your perception of the world in both its outer and its inner aspects. And to alternate, it asks you to alternate shifting between your outer and inner aspects as you challenge these ideas, right? Again, to help you break down that boundary between something outer and something inner. That they're all, it's just energy flowing, and that we have these physical boundaries which impact our sight, but are not our true spiritual sight. And it asks you to kind of glance around at the world you perceive as outside yourself, and then close your eyes and survey your inner thoughts, and do it with the same degree of intensity. Don't focus more on the outside or more on the inside, to give kind of equal weight to all of those things. And to try, it says, try to maintain or be equally uninvolved in both, and to maintain this detachment as you repeat the idea throughout the day. So whenever something's happened that upsets you, whenever something's happening, you say, there's another way of looking at this, right? So with the car battery, that seems pretty concrete. Like, how could anyone be happy with a dead battery? Okay, so there's another way of looking at this. I could have said, I needed to slow down. Now I'm slowing down. Could have said, this is a fixable problem. I can get a new battery, right? Those are another, instead of my day is ruined, the kids are going to be stranded, This is an opportunity to call on help from my friends. This is an opportunity for the kids to have an unexpected play date because they're going home with a friend instead of me. This is an opportunity for me to meet someone that I never would have met from another country, which was this Russian AAA tow guy. So there is another way of looking at this, no matter what's happening. I've been in medical situations where I've been very upset, and this has been a huge savior for me, and not like going to town like I did with the car battery about what's going to happen 10 miles. Like, our mind will take us there, but this brings us back home. It's not that our mind is not going to go there anymore until we're like super well trained at this, but now we have a tool to come back to our sanity and to actually be effective in the present. Because if I'm full of fear about all these things that are happening, I'm taken out, right? If I'm, my day is ruined, the kids are stranded, I'm without a car for a week, we will have no groceries. That was a thought that occurred to me. How are we going to have groceries in the house? How am I going to get home now? Like, I'm freaking out, and I can't do anything. I can't even call AAA, right? Right?
Yeah, because you're thinking about all of that.
Exactly.
And so quickly.
Right. And that's how fast our mind is and how trained it is in fear. And I teach this stuff because it helps me. It's not because I don't experience fear. I'm like in the 99th percentile of fearful people, probably. And that's why I'm so grateful that I discovered this course, because now I'm able to come back to sanity. I have a tool that I didn't have before. So
it looks like you have a passion as well, because the way you speak, it's really wired for me.
Well, you know, it's just, I have passion because I've seen the results, and that's how it is. It's an individual experience, and when you see that something can transform what would be constant struggle to something else, you feel very hopeful, and you want others to be able to share it if they so would like or not. Some people automatically think in a certain way that is not fear-based, which God bless them.
No, it's because they don't know that there's another way. It's just because they don't know.
Exactly, they weren't trained in it.
They haven't, because if they get a glimpse that there's another way, they'll be ready to find it. But
Right.
It's like they're so certain there's like most people like that, they think that the way it is, they have to accept the way it is, they have to work it or whatever. There's like not even a glimpse.
Exactly, like we don't believe that there's any alternative. And that's why if you look in every like spiritual tradition and then in certain schools of psychotherapy, right, it's all about challenging the perception and is this perception real, and what is another way of seeing this very same thing, that there is no reality. There is no objective truth or reality. It's all what we create, which means our minds are incredibly, incredibly powerful, right? For good or for not good. So this is about training. That's why I say this is a psychological retraining, because it's harnessing all that energy that we could use for not good and rechanneling it into a way that makes our lives happier and more peaceful. And that's the goal of this course, is to bring you peace in any moment, no matter what is happening around you, to be in peace around it as much as possible. So, to close out this lesson, remember to apply today's idea the instant you are aware of distress. It may be necessary to take a minute or so to sit quietly and repeat the idea to yourself several times, and closing your eyes will probably help in the application. So anything that is happening, if you take one thing from today's lesson, right? Anything that is happening that upsets you, any thought or any physical action in the world, something that seems to be external to you or internal to you, that there is another way of looking at this. Right, that's the way this works. And then what follows, we won't do this lesson today because this is a big one, but I could see peace instead of this. So that's what you could almost say if you don't know. This lesson is saying there's another way of looking at this, but if you can't think of a way of looking at this differently, you can say, I could see peace instead of this. And you will feel that feeling of peace. Even if you don't have the physical words to put on the situation differently, you know what peace feels like, and you can apply that peace to yourself. So that's where you don't have to have the perfect answer. You can just say, I will choose to feel peace instead of this, because peace is better than whatever else is going on that feels so upsetting or distressing. Okay, so that was a lot for today. So I encourage you for this next week to really practice that, to practice in situations, the moment you notice that you're feeling upset, choosing a different thought, choosing to see it differently, and becoming a really vigilant observer of your own thoughts. Because the only way that we know how to see things differently is if we're aware of what we're actually doing to ourselves with our own minds. Any questions before we finish up? We're good?
We're good.
So next week, actually, we won't be meeting because I'm out of town. This is the last Friday that I'm out of town. I had some travel back to back, so we won't be meeting next Friday, but we will meet in 2 weeks. And just keep me updated on how things are going. And thank you, Periscope friends.